of the Senate Joint Committee on Finance, Custom, Excise and Tariff, Trade and Investment, Public Procurement on the Finance Bill 2020. Mr. President, 0.1 speaks about the introduction, which has to do with the day in which the bill was read for the first time, and also the day the bill was sent to the committee, which is Wednesday, 2nd December 2020. And it was referred to a joint committee of Finance, Custom, Excise and Tariff, Trade and Investment, and Public Procurement. Also, a total number of 12 acts was to be amended under the Finance Bill 2020, which include over 64 section clauses, and the committee immediately swing into action. Section 2.0 have the list of all members of the committee, that is Finance, Custom, Excise and Tariff, Trade and Investment, and Public Procurement. Mr. President, Section 3.0 contains the list of acts to be amended on the Finance Bill, which is divided into 12, which include the Capital Gain Tax, the Company Income Tax Act, the Industrial Development Income Tax Relief Act, the Personal Income Tax Act, the Tertiary Education Trust Fund Establishment Act, the Custom, Excise and Tariff Act, the Value Added Tax Act, the Stamp Duty Act, the Electronic Transaction Levy, which is also part of the stamp duty, the Federal Inland Revenue Establishment Act, Nigerian Export Processing Zone Authority Act, the Oil and Gas Export Processing Zone Act, the Crisis Intervention Fund, Unclaimed Fund Trust Fund, the Company and Allied Matter Act 2020, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and the Public Procurement Act. All together was to be amended. 4.0 has to do the methodology that was adopted by the committee in attending to the bill presented to the National Assembly, which put together, there are 5 different methods that was adopted in arriving at the report and by extension, the bill itself. And as you're all aware, this particular bill is to support the 2021 Appropriation Act. 5.0, Mr. President, which I would like to go through, speaks on the objective of the bill. The objective of the bill is to strategically amend the following: adopt the critical counter-cyclical fiscal policies to 1, respond to current economic challenges of COVID-19 and decline in oil prices/revenue. 2, to defer tax rate increase till the domestic economy sufficiently recovered, e.g. maintaining the VAT rate at 7.5 in line with the recent increases pursuant to Finance Act of 2019. 3, reduce compliance burden of taxpayers in line with the ease of doing business reform, e.g. the FIRS to engage with regulators such as CBN first to obtain data on regulated taxpayers such as banks before requesting any data readily available from CBN, from the banks and directly or through consultants. 5.2, reform fiscal incentive policy to reduce the proliferation of fiscal incentive by carefully assessing the cost versus benefit of tax incentive. 2, to prioritize job creation, growth and investment, e.g. reduce taxation of capital by cutting minimum tax rate in companies from 0.5 to 0.25. 5.3, closer coordination of monetary trade and fiscal policy by aligning the existing tax incentive for lending to agriculture with recent CBN moratorium and interest rate reduction for agricultural and the real sector loans. 2, reform to stamp duty levy on banking transaction. And 3, unclaimed dividends and unclaimed bank balances reform, that is the dormant account. 6.0 contains the public hearing. Mr. President, what we have in 6.0 have to do with the list of stakeholders that make presentation, submit memorandum on the bill. 6.0, which I would like to go through with the recommendation, which has to do with the observation of the committee on each of those bills that were presented for amendment. Some of the items contained in the bill were left the way it is, while some, the committee feels that there are 1 or 2 observation or that needs to be made in order to make it more accommodating. Number one, under the capital gain tax, the committee observed that the 180 days recommended by the bill will be cumbersome enough where there are multiple disposal of assets. That is under section 2 of the capital gain tax, where the bill seeks to say that anybody who dispose the chargeable asset must immediately within 180 days calculate the tax and remit to the government within 180 days of the disposal of that asset. And what we felt as committee is that if I dispose one asset today and tomorrow I dispose another one, the third time I dispose the other one, I will have to file my returns within 180 days of each of those disposals. And we felt it would be too cumbersome for that kind of transaction to be. So we make our recommendation. When we get to the recommendation section, I will let you, the Senate knows. Two, we have the Company Income Tax Act. That is the second act that were proposed for amendment by the executive. And what they intend to achieve in that particular act is to have our Company Income Tax Act to be in alliance with the international global best practices. And few of those sections that have been proposed include one, the committee observed that the value in kind donation made to government or any of its other designated agency could be different from the actual cost incurred by those donors. Because what we have is that under section 8, subsection I of the proposed amendment, the word value in kind, which has to do with the value that might be estimated of whatever any donor who intends to give something to the government donor cannot be actually estimated, because during this pandemic era, a lot of companies make donations to our government in supporting the government during the trying period, and the government felt that at least something must be done in this regard by granting some reliefs and some tax incentive. And what we are saying is this: there's nothing bad in doing that, but using the word value in kind, how do we even actually estimate the actual value of this particular donation that has been made? So the committee felt that we should use the appropriate words to replace that word value. When we get to the recommendation section, we will look into it. The committee also observed that 25% of the accessible profit is too high for a voluntary donation. And what the government is saying is that after you have computed your accessible profit, 25% of that profit should be given as relief to those companies that have made donation. The committee felt that it is too high for somebody who has voluntarily donated to us and somebody which this country has benefited for this country for several years. We felt that particular figure is too high. The committee also observed that the new section 27(1)(c) introduced was too restrictive for the purpose of ease of doing business. And in this time around, we are saying that the penalty they were not allowed, which include that were not allowed, aside the legislation made by this National Assembly, we are saying that we are giving the courts and even through regulations to ensure that they can sit in their confine of their office, issue regulation on new penalties that are supposed to be disallowed. We felt that is too cumbersome. At the recommendation level 2, we look into it. The committee observed that section 63(7) was ambiguous and unnecessary. And we will get there. That has to do with the books of account, which you need to prepare in every financial year. Also, section 7, the committee observed that initial tax-free period granted to these industries is relatively high. What are we saying here? The initial tax-free period, which otherwise known as the pioneer period, we have a first year of 5 years and a second year of 3 years. What that simply means that for any company who established in Nigeria, for the next 8 years, that company will not pay any tax until after 8 years. The committee felt that 8 years at this point in time, when the country is going through a lot of challenges, the number of years that has been granted as free period from paying tax is relatively high. Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, we go to the Custom and Excise Tariff Act. The committee observed that the word service is too wide and could be misinterpreted as applicable to a wide range of services. What are we trying to say here, Mr. President, distinguished colleague? We noticed that long before now, we normally use what we use a card, a recharge card, in paying for our form. On every recharge card, there is an excise duty that is being paid. But since they have tended to go technology, that there is no way, no recharge card again, you can just call the number and they will post that credit to your phone and you will have it. And we felt that the word service, that was what was used. And we felt that it can be interpreted to any service-related companies across the country. So we tend to go specific to look at the area that particular item is trying to target. So we go into specific and we mention that particular area which has to do with the telecommunication. Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, the committee also observed that there were issues that was raised at the public hearing concerning issue of the automobile policy, concerning issue of levies and duties that were being charged on our airline industries and everything, which was extensively discussed. And the Minister of Finance and the Nigerian Customs Service, who was present at that particular hearing, agreed in its entirety that yes, there is a presidential directive granting these waivers and duties and even this VAT item, and it is need for them to have it, because every year they have to go back and ask for this waiver through a presidential directive that can take to at least maybe the next 1 year, 2 years, and parts of airlines planes brought into this country can be in the custom office for the next 1 year, 2 years without any solution or any way out of the logjam. Also, Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, under the Stamp Duty Act, the committee observed that the Central Bank of Nigeria may be overburdened with the additional responsibility of imposition, administration, collection and remittance of the electronic tax levy. Mr. President, long before now, the electronic tax levy, which has been in the front burner, which has been a controversial issue between the Ministry of Communication and Ministry of Finance, has been issued in the front burner. But as we speak, the Central Bank of Nigeria is saddled with the responsibility of imposing of administration and collection and of remittance of this electronic levy. And there have been issues which I have brought to the notice of this Senate long before now, and there were motions whereby we are asked to even investigate what has gone into that account, how much has been going, and how is this money coming into it. So the committee felt, after extensive and exhaustive deliberation at the public hearing with the Honorable Minister of Finance and all other representatives, or even the Central Bank of Nigeria, that we should look at a way of trying to transmit this responsibility to other sources and making the Central Bank of Nigeria to only warehouse these funds accruing to the government to allow for check and balances from both angles that we have decided to place this particular fund, but not taking the Central Bank out of it in its entirety, but allowing them to warehouse the money, but saddling the responsibility of imposing and also of administration and collection to another agencies of government. At the recommendation, we will be able to speak extensively on that. The committee also observed that there is a sharing formula that should be likely to the state of derivation was not introduced in the bill. Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, we observed that this electronic transfer is majorly more for the state government and not for the federal. But because the platform and the need to collect this fund rests with the federal. Long before now, this money is collected, and all that we collect from the federal collect from it is the cost of collection, where the sharing is done among the states of the federation. And as such, this was not reported in the bill. And we are also being careful under Section 163 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, where it was extensively mentioned the role and the need for this particular item of transaction, which says that the net proceeds of what accrued to it goes to the state, while what was removed to arrive at that net proceed is the cost of collection, which is collected by the Federal Inland Revenue Services on a yearly basis. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, we also went further to look into the Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act, which was also proposed for amendment. And what that act is trying to achieve, Mr. President, long before now, we have been saying that there is need for the government to automate our tax system. That this idea of applying only manual system on collection of our taxes, where it's making us to lose huge amount of revenue. That if we could go a step further by automating our tax system, a lot of revenue will be accruing to us. And by so doing, they propose an amendment in the bill. But what is the bottleneck in that amendment, Mr. President? There were two issues which was on ground. Number one was that the FRS need to go through the regulators for them to be able to do tax automation. And they felt that it might be pretty difficult for them to achieve this if they have to go through regulators and doing this. And in accordance with the Establishment Act of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, there was no such provision. There were a lot of argument back and forth or so, and it's in a bid that I believe that those regulators also want a share of their own this thing, so that by the time the money is collected, they can ask for their own share from the cost of collection of the FIRS. And the FIRS believe this will not only hinder the set target of trying to automate the tax system and generate more revenue to the government, but it will be serve as a distraction for the Federal Inland Revenue Services in performing its duty, and which is the business of collection of taxes. Mr. President, last before the list, we have the Unclaimed Trust Fund. Mr. President, you are aware that there are issues that have been raised concerning the Unclaimed Trust Fund, which deals with the unclaimed dividend and the dormant account that has been left behind. Long before now, in accordance with the Company and Allied Matter Act, we have a 12 years period for any account or any unclaimed dividend. If not claimed, we have to be returned back to the company where that unclaimed dividend comes from. And for the dormant account, will be warehoused or sent to the Central Bank of Nigeria. The government of the day is trying to, one, to make best use of this opportunity to the betterment of not only of the government, but even to the owners of this fund. And what have they proposed? Mr. President, they are looking at it that globally, all over the world, the number of years of 12 years which we have put in the Company and Allied Matter Decree is too much. The standard is 6 years. They have decided to reduce it to 6 years. And this time around, they are going to take up this fund in form of loan to be managed by the Debt Management Office. And what that tends to achieve is this, sir. And we have tried as much as possible to put a mechanism in place through establishment of, one, the governing council of this trust fund, two, the functions of the Debt Management Office, and three, the power of this unclaimed trust fund account. Mr. President, what that we tend to achieve is that long before now, if you don't collect your unclaimed dividend for the next 5 years, the day you go there, when they are giving you, they'll be giving you on the face value. If the figure there is 300 naira, the day you decided to go and collect it, they'll only give you 300 naira. But this time around, it's a different ball game, because government is taking this as a loan, and which means that the money will be invested, and it will come along with accrued interest. At any point in time, you decided to collect your fund, or you approach your registrar that you want to pick up your money or so, you cannot be given the face value. It will be the face value plus the interest accrued over the years. That is what the government have tried to put. But even at that, we have decided to be careful in trying to ensure that proper mechanism is put in place to have a unit trust fund that is actually functional and that will protect the right of Nigerian citizenry. And we also ensure that if government collect this money through registrars of banks and everything, we want that whenever anybody who has to claim any unclaimed dividend or want to resuscitate his dormant account doesn't need to come to government. He has to go back to the registrar or to his bank. And from there, the bank and the registrar will communicate with the government of the day and also make sure that they refund the money through the registrar and to the bank to the original owner of the money. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, we went into the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, as you all are aware, that this is one agency of the government that have been left behind for a long time. And we felt that there is need for us as a Senate to be more proactive this time around. But, sir, the fundamentals of this Fiscal Responsibility Act, that is the purpose of which it was set for, was not actually addressed. The emphasis was placed on the summary. I'm not reading. Mr. President.
This Chairman. I think the mood of the Senate is that the Senate would have been better off with you reading your report than talking. Maybe we would have finished if we are reading. So round up.
Also, we looked into the value-added tax and the fiscal responsibility act. The recommendation, Mr. President, all that have been said along the line, which have served as our observation, and by so doing you will know that our recommendation will be in line with trying to right the wrong that was contained in the bill. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I so submit.
Any comment on the motion that the Senate resolves into committee of the whole to consider the report of the joint committee clause by clause, say aye. Those against, any ayes have it. Clauses 1 to 76 as recommended. Short title as recommended. Long title as recommended. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the committee of the whole? Thank you. Of the Senate.
585, third reading.
A bill for an act to amend the Capital Gains Tax Act, Companies Income Tax Act, Personal Income Tax Act, Tertiary Education Trust Fund Establishment Act, Customs and Excise Tariff, etc. Consolidated Act, Value Added Tax, Federal Revenue Service Establishment Act, Nigeria Export Processing Zone Act, Oil and Gas Export Free Zone Act, Fiscal Responsibility Act, Companies and Allied Matters Act 2020, Public Procurement Act, in order to make further provisions in connection with federal government financial management, public revenue, and other relevant matters connected there with 2020, third reading taken, and the bill is passed. Congratulations. Leader of the Senate.